Hi, this is Tish Aitken, and I'm here to discuss the astrology for the week of April 20th. So, to begin with, we had a very volatile week this past week. The sun in Aries has set off all the stellium of planets that set the tone for the year and for the decade, which means that when we began the year in January of this year, we had a stellium of planets in Capricorn, the most amount of Capricorn we'll ever have in this lifetime. And Saturn and Pluto, which are the two malefics, met up at 22 degrees of Capricorn. And every time a planet or the moon enters a cardinal sign, and in this case, we're in Aries season, or we just entered Aries, left Aries season for the sun. But Mercury, which is communication, is currently transiting still in the sign of Aries. And that's a cardinal fire sign. That's going to trigger all of this Capricorn story that we've all been working with since the beginning of the year. And what this means is mass karma, renovation, death, and rebirth for all of us on some level, on the global and the collective, but also in our own individual lives. Wherever that is, wherever that story is coming up for you in your life, that's going to be a story you're working with all year, and how you can renovate and repair it and hopefully work with it or commit to it, and with integrity and leadership. And if it's not working in your life, taking accountability and ownership of what is working and what is not working, and really trying to hone in on what those areas are for you. And I think, again, that's something you're going to know individually. You can't, I mean, that's something you're going to have to search within. I think it's going to be pretty obvious in most cases. So with all of that said, we had the sun in Aries triggering all of this stuff last week. It felt like last year. And it squared Pluto on Tuesday, and then it squared Jupiter the following day on Wednesday. And that's when there were rallies and protests and amping things up on a big level. And later in the year, Mars, which is the god of war, is going to enter the cardinal fire sign of Aries on June 30th. And it's going to be in Aries for the remainder of the year, but it will retrograde from September 9th until November 13th. And that is going to have, Mars is going to have three challenging aspects with planets at 22 degrees of Capricorn, of the world axis, where Saturn and Pluto originally met on January 12th, but also setting off where Venus was earlier in the year when it was in Aries, where Mars is going to station direct at 15 cardinal at 15 degrees of Aries, and it's going to be going back and forth. It's going to be quite a time ahead of us. And right now this week we have Mercury also setting things off. But to begin with, so the moon entered Aries at 3 o'clock a.m. on early this morning. And early on Tuesday morning, on the 21st, the sun in Taurus is going to form a square to Saturn in Aquarius. Now, Saturn has briefly entered the sign of Aquarius until July 2nd. And Saturn is also in its rulership. It's in ancient astrology, it rules the sign of Aquarius, and in modern astrology, it rules the sign of Capricorn. So it's still in a sign it rules, but it's much more about technology and community, and about the intellect, and about brilliance and innovation when it's in Aquarius. It's much more about thinking in communal terms than thinking about, what one can accomplish. Or in Capricorn, it's very goal oriented, and it's very much about accomplishment, more maybe in traditional senses. In Aquarius, it's really more about thinking about the good of the whole tribe, and also about how one can excel in more unique and innovative ways. So it's really bringing things into a futuristic level. And I think it's helpful for all of us to still have it in its rulership, but have it in a sign that thinks about humanity at large, and also thinks about things in a very, in an unorthodox way sometimes. And it's collapsing of old structures in many ways with all these planets meeting up in Capricorn. So we have the sun squaring Saturn on Tuesday. And that's going to be quite like last week. People are going to feel very restricted and held back. The sun is in a fire cardinal sign, wants to get ahead, wants to move. It's ruled by Mars. And again, it feels very repressed and held back by Saturn energy, by the Capricorn energy, although Saturn is currently in Taurus. So, sorry, in Aquarius. So it is restrictive energy and it does make us feel held back. But it's about, again, being in a world where we're going to have to think creatively about how we work within these restrictions, and that it is a new world, but that we've endured other plagues and other situations, and we're going to have to keep fighting ahead. And how do we do so in a way that's not so isolating, in a way that does embody and embrace communication and community, but also is about finding new ways to work in this new constraint that we're all in. So uh, it's not going to feel fun today and in the beginning of the week, but we also have a very creative new moon in Taurus that takes place on April 22nd at 10:26 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time, and it's going to be at 3 degrees of Taurus. And in the chart I cast for the East Coast, it has Sagittarius rising, which means that Jupiter is the ruler of the chart, and that is the grand benefic. It's the planet of optimism and expansion. That's the planet that recently met up with Pluto in Capricorn. And they're going to meet up two more times. They're going to meet up again on June 30th and on November 12th. So that is more about the transformative effects of Jupiter and Pluto. But that this new moon, in Taurus, is a exalted new moon that falls in the fifth house of creative self-expression. The fifth house deals with it's the Leo house in astrology. It's creative self-expression. It's the house of performers. It's romance. It's children. It's the inner child in all of us. It's love affairs. It's fun. And I think that we need to tap into the creativity is very pronounced in this, in that Taurus itself is a very creative sign ruled by Venus. It's bringing form in a tangible way to uh, our creative pursuits, whether it's singing, dancing. It's very physical, in Taurus. And it's also conjunct Uranus, which is the maverick planet. It's the planet of ingenuity. It does not like being in Taurus, but this is a world right now where we have to deal with change. Taurus does not like dealing with change generally. The typical Taurus is a very fixed earth sign. It's fixed earth. It's very resistant, but we have to, work with change. And if we're going to do so, we might as well have the mad genius on the side of the sun and moon, bringing in new opportunities, and also really thinking in much broader terms than you normally would think, in much more, really think outside the box, not to be cliche, because that is a very cliche thing to say, but do better than I'm doing, and really think in ways that are futuristic and are very creative, and with Sagittarius rising are also very hopeful, and that's the energy of this new moon. And Venus, it rules the chart, or sorry, rules the new moon, and Venus is currently out of bounds, which means it's not playing by the rules, and it's currently in its shadow, which means it's going to retrograde from May 13th until June 25th. And so with Venus in its shadow and about to retrograde, there's very much a theme on partnering and the Venus and Gemini energy, which is about duality. It's about choices, but it's also not a cardinal sign, luckily. So it's not setting off all this Capricorn story every time a planet does, because we know Mars will indeed be doing so in a major way later in the year. But it's still reflective on choices we have. And maybe you don't want to go to the past. That's not the choice with all the Capricorn that happened. Pluto cycles, and the world is on a mass Pluto transit when it's on the world axis. That's permanent change. We're never going back. Doesn't mean we won't return to normalcy. It means that we're never going to go back to quite the way it's been. It just isn't going to happen. But what's going to happen is that Taurus itself is a very creative sign. And look back to when Uranus first entered the sign of Taurus on May 15th of 2018, and then it briefly exited Taurus on November 6th of 2018 and re-entered Taurus in April of last year of 2019. And what that means is it's finding innovation through resistance, through being creative, through finding new systems and new ways of value, finding new value in many different things, art, money, the ways we earn money, and hopefully waking up to the ways that have not been organic, because Taurus is such a sign associated uh, with natural organic creativity. And I think that out of all the signs is the most associated with the earth out of the three earth signs, which are Taurus, Capricorn, and Virgo. I think it's most associated with Mother Earth. And we're going to see a lot more around plant medicine and alternative ways of healing ourselves. And I think that will be much more of a focus, all the anxiety people are experiencing right now as a result of this situation we're currently in, and dealing with things in a more natural way. But in the interim, this is a turbulent week. And, Pluto is also about to station retrograde. So we feel, the outer planets retrograde for several months a year. So you're not really feeling that. It's not perceptible for the majority of it, but it is when the planet is stationing retrograde or direct. And in this case, it stations retrograde on April 25th. So we feel the energy 5 days before and 5 days after. So first of all, with this new moon in Taurus, we feel the beginning of the week, this very, again, people feeling very angry and feeling irritable and restricted. That's going to be very prominent in the beginning of the week with the sun in Taurus square Saturn in Aquarius. That feels held back by authority and feeling pissed off. The new moon in Taurus is very creative, ruled by Venus. It's in the fifth house of creativity and love and self-expression. Love is the key of this new moon. And then as we get to the end of the week, well, Pluto is stationing retrograde. So we're really feeling that energy all week, 5 days before and 5 days after. Pluto is the cosmic compost. It eliminates what's no longer working in order to transcend. There likely will be major endings this week as well, with the Pluto station, with Pluto being one of the key players of the year, as that was the conjunction of Saturn and Pluto at the world axis at 22 degrees of Capricorn on January 12th. Pluto's only 2 degrees away right now. And on Saturday, Mercury in Aries is squaring Pluto. So you can imagine that there are going to be major power struggles at the end of the week and over the weekend with that energy. Although the moon in Taurus is making lovely aspects on Friday, it's going to form a sextile, which is an aspect of opportunity to Neptune, which is the dream. Neptune in Pisces. Then it's going to form a trine to Pluto, the planet of transformation, which is about to retrograde. And it's going to form a trine to Jupiter, the luckiest planet. And that's going to go, the moon will go void with a trine to Jupiter. And that's lovely. But then it's going to enter Gemini early on Saturday. And we have that Pluto station. We've got Mercury in Aries, again, combative and fiery, squaring Pluto. I think secrets and hidden information will be uncovered with that as this week. I think a lot will happen. And you can expect a lot of the unexpected with the moon in Taurus conjunct Uranus, the planet of the unexpected. And on Sunday, the sun in Taurus is going to meet up with Uranus in Taurus. So that with this Pluto station, it's going to be a wild week, maybe even wilder than last week, but definitely comparable. So what you want to do is tap into the creativity, tap into the love. There's ingenious energy that's accessible to all of us, but obviously there's very fiery, combative energy that's accessible to all of us. So use that passion to plunge forward into what you want to develop and you want to create, and keep away from triggers, and say you're sorry if you trigger other people, because it's likely that both will happen. And this is a very creative week, but it's a week of major endings and major changes. And also the nodes of fate are entering the world axis, meaning any planet at 0 degrees of the cardinal signs. Well, the nodes of fate are, as of, I believe, the 21st, are going to 0 degrees of Capricorn, where the south node will be, and 0 degrees of Cancer. Well, what do we want to look at with that? Well, first of all, we want to look at global events and events on the world stage, but also we want to look at what was happening in 2008 to 2009, because that's when Pluto was at 0 degrees of Capricorn. And when it entered the cardinal earth sign of Capricorn, the south node of karma, which is about to change signs because they're exiting Capricorn Cancer on May 5th and then entering Sagittarius Gemini. Stories of '08 and '09 will be triggered this week, and see what comes up for you. And know this will be another rocky and historic week, and I wish you a lot of luck. Be productive and lay low. And thank you. Take care.